to be talking about today, rather than some weird abstract concepts, is the architecture is power. We need power, we need data, and we need compute, which generates the token. So these are really important things. I know it's boring hardware conversations, but you guys develop the applications on this stuff. So we need to make sure those applications are getting the best of this stuff. So if this stuff is fundamentally broken, what you produce will end up being unsustainable and not great for your businesses. So actually, this is important. With me, sorry. Yeah, there we go. So, do you know what token economics is? Raise of hands. Other than the people at HPE. Cheaters. So, token economics. How many of you guys are generating tokens in a public cloud hybrid environment right now? A few. Okay. What's the cost of that token? Can anyone tell me what that cost is? No. Depends on the token. Yes. Good point. You're backing up my entire thing. Thank you. So if you can work out the cost of the token, can you work out how sustainable it was to create that token? Sorry? There we go. Thank you very much. This guy's reading my mind. It's beautiful. So these things are really important: power, data, compute. So we need to make sure that the power is efficient and sustainable. If it's not sustainable, it's not great for all of us. But actually, how much that power costs is going to be a direct attribute to how much your token is going to cost. Same with data. If your data quality is shit, guess what? You're going to generate more tokens because you're getting the wrong answer until you get the right answer. So we need to make sure the data is really good. And then the compute, like, I work for a hardware manufacturer, right? I'm bound to say that you need to make sure that you've got the most performant and the best hardware available. But you also need to make sure that you're maximizing that in terms of orchestration and automation. So actually, are we fully utilizing that hardware? Are we fully utilizing the benefit of the power that we're pumping in? So if we move on, power is a variable, the data is a variable in terms of cost, and so is the compute. So this is all about thinking about what is the workload, what is the token to associate to this. So the true cost of the token is a variable, but we can make it more predictable by understanding those variables. I think that's what we do at HPE quite well, help customers understand that. I received this slide from NVIDIA today. Reasoning drives 100 times more tokens. So can you understand why I'm saying that the token's really important, and understand why we need to know what the cost per token is? Yep. So this is a scenario, right? Argue with the numbers all you want, right? Go away and do your own research. Is actually consuming an AI service from a public cloud provider as beneficial as doing the hosted model that we're going to talk a bit about later in terms of open source. And from our research, as I say, argue with the numbers, and please do benchmark this independently yourselves, is can you do an open source model that gives you the ROI that you're expecting as a business or as an app developer on a self-hosted system? So you probably look at me and you think, Matt, you're a bit weird. And I do think about the world an awful lot. And I think about sustainability, and I work for a hardware manufacturer that's designed to consume power. But actually, the sustainability angle is really important. And one of the reasons I'm quite enjoying being in front of all you is to get you to think about the sustainability approach. Do you have sustainable power? Do you have sustainable data and compute? And is it utilizing that power correctly? We work with some great co-location partners based in the Nordics that have 100% carbon-free data centers. So some really cool stuff. So that's the boring bit, the hardware. I don't think it's boring. I think it's quite interesting, but this is the more sexy stuff. Yeah. But how do you bring all that together? So one thing that I think the public cloud did was give an experience, a cohesive experience. So as app developers, you can go in and you can basically commission a bit of storage, a bit of VM or whatever it might be, and you can go away and deploy it. Technology, IT vendors didn't really catch up to that. And that's why you ended up with like lots of managed service providers helping do that. We've come an awful long way as an industry to give customers this kind of experience that you get from the public cloud. So central control, observability, giving automation. So when you request a resource, it just automatically gets assigned to you. Multi-tenancy and isolation. If you look at what's happening around data sovereignty, really important. Actually having a sovereign data center that you have access to, that you can do the user needs and service models to, really important. This is what it looks like in actuality. Boring stuff at the bottom, the infrastructure. Then you've got the operating system. Then you've got the control plane and the AI workloads at the top. Looks really simple as a layer cake there. This is the actuality, right? Workflows, applications, frameworks, runtime, agents, the stuff you guys care about at the top end. The stuff my team and I care about is kind of this lower bit, actually. How do we give you a service catalog of Ubuntu builds that are up to date, etc.? How do we give you role-based access so the users that you've given control to have access to it rather than randomers? And then this bit sits across the entire thing. So you've got the security, lifecycle operations. Actually, how do you make sure all of this stuff, whether it's software or the hardware, is all up to date? And that's where we can come in with a product called Morpheus and Optra. And then this observability piece. So it's great having all this stuff, but if you can't see in real time what the hell's going on and where the pitfalls and the errors are, it's useless. So this is kind of the solutions that we're bringing to customers that want sovereignty, sustainability, and a real user experience. Believe it or not, we've got a portfolio. We do pretty much everything. You guys can go away and do it yourself, DIY. We have a turnkey solution called PCAI. And then we have this co-create, which is the area that I sit in, is understanding the customer's challenges, where we can fit in. I wanted to leave you with something interesting. I got sent this report the other day, the Matt Clifford report, which was submitted into Parliament. It's really interesting. He talks about everything that I've just mentioned, ironically. It's a really good document. Go check it out. Slides will be shared. We've also got some events as HPE coming up. So that's me.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. Very helpful. It's going to put these in an aspect of the I'm probably very more question. That user as users with co-pilots. This one is assessments success. And this question is where or balance of things
I don't have a comparison in terms of cost. I think it's definitely got a use case and a place in the market. I think from what I'm seeing personally, where the stuff that I talk about, it's a certain tipping point where a business is like, you know what, Copilot just isn't enough. And they want to do their own funky stuff on premise, utilizing app developers and doing it a little bit more creative. I think there's the aspects of sovereignty that tends to crop up and GDPR sort of conversations. It depends on the business needs and requirements. If Copilot is working fine, that's cool. But if you want to develop that further, that's where the kind of cost comparison, because it's not just like, oh, we're doing Copilot. It's like all these other random projects and things that are, hopefully that answers it.
Thank you. Very nice presentation, by the way. I want to basically ask quite maybe a simple question is that from your current research and talking to different businesses and even executives, do you think that right now, like for example, industry itself, okay, general industry itself, is someone ready to jump onto the bandwagon, onto the main AI systems, let's say roller coaster that is about to come, basically?
I ponder this one often, and what I'll probably have to suffix this with, this is Matt Shaw's opinion, not HPE's. So what I'm seeing is some big customers making some big investments that you see in the news. I'm seeing NVIDIA position this narrative that customers will eventually buy probably 10 or 20 GPUs on premise. I'd say that's happening in some scenarios. I wouldn't say it's happening at a scale of mass. I think what I see is a lot of big customers spending big. And I think there's this kind of gap between the reality, and the reason that I presented what I presented is people don't understand the challenges fundamentally, because there's an entire data sovereignty conversation, there's a sustainability conversation, there's a utilization conversation. And it's the problem is a lot of these AI initiatives are spinning up from someone saying, we need to implement AI, and they go away and do that, and then it fails. But there's no, like, from a lot of the conversations I had, we genuinely had a customer at a meeting where the data scientist met the IT guy for the first time at our event. So it's like, how do you bring this collaboration together? And it's a challenge that I see. And the reason I presented what I presented is to say, look, we all need to work together and understand actually the three fundamental problems: power, data, compute. If we get those three things right, we get AI right. Hopefully that answers that.
Oh, yeah, I think maybe it's a slight statement, or maybe a slight statement would be basically what you're saying is that at the end of the day, quite low business don't they try to implement it without understanding it fully, right? If that's the crux of it, right? Or am I wrong in that, basically?
That's what I've seen.
Then of course.
But then there's obviously some equally talented customers that are absolutely smashing it. But the majority tend to be dabbling, experimenters, science projects. But there's rationality. It goes back to the token economics things, right? As soon as you know how much a token is going to cost you, you can justify the ROI, right? So the logic for me is actually the token costs me X, the risk profile is this, go away and implement it at scale and see what happens. Yeah. Like the one thing that we are really bad at is like, just as an industry, is like trying to get away from the market and just putting it into real brass tacks terms in terms of what does it actually mean. So our techies are so technical, right? They are genius. We're an engineering company. So I said, look, I need you to present for 20 minutes at one of our road shows. And they sent me 100 slides just on like the PSU side. But this basically shows the trend, right? This is where power requirements for GPUs going. So this, oh, it's not sharing. Sorry. But yeah, I can show you after. I can put it in the slides so you've got it. But like the power requirements is increasing. And then one fix to that is we've been doing like direct liquid cooling for a long time. So it's like data centers aren't ready for that. So the infrastructure is not there. So we also do things like mod pods. So we deliver a pod of compute and just literally can dump it on a car park. So that's already got the liquid cooling in there. But what we can help current data centers with, because they're not going to rip all that stuff out overnight, the data center of the future might get there, but we also have hybrid cooling. So it kind of helps with that sustainability angle. Oh, legendary, yeah. It is crazy. But I mean, if you want a deeper dive into these slides, we are doing a AI roadshow on the 8th of May. So just keep an eye out for that. I was in the Middle East, right, recently doing a roadshow, and they're putting four servers in a 48 rack queue. So that means the other, like, just because that's how much power you can get into the one rack for the 4 GPU clusters. So it's like, it is a massive challenge. But this is why I talk about the data center of the future. And we need to address it as an industry, because if you can do it more sustainably by having a slightly different approach, because like the logic would be, we need to get this application up and running quickly, get that, but we can't like neglect the sustainability angle. But we can also do things like the mod pod, get it delivered and get you up and running so you can utilize that. So it's a big challenge.
To basically use intelligence for the thinking behind this, as opposed to outputting the thinking into that.
So like, this is why the terms are horrible, because ultimately all it's going to be doing is using compute. The token's just a nice way for people to understand and digest it. Ultimately, it's going to be sat using compute. It's going to be sat using power, most probably. But it all goes down to the workload. So like one of the big things that we offer at HPE is something like the right mix advisor. So it's like, how do you best maximize the workload? And the problem is it requires thought. And it's not easy. I've been sat in those shoes. Like someone turns to me and says, how many gigabytes of data are you going to store over the next 3 years? I've not got a fucking clue. I can predict potentially, but usually like in IT, we always work to an 80% buffer. It's just safe, which then means it's underutilized. So actually the utilization and how you orchestrate that's really important. My prediction, so if you look at the way that Jensen talks about it, right? He says the token is the thing that will generate new outcomes and new solutions for businesses. He talks about $100 trillion opportunity for businesses to take advantage of, which is the AI factory and token narrative. So in the short term, I think this is very much like going to a bank and asking for a loan and you get 1,000% interest. No, you want it at the lowest interest. So like, how do you bring that token price down? And this is where me personally, I'm kind of looking at it and just going, actually, if I can get the most efficient power, most best-in-class data, and the most efficient compute, and I can orchestrate that, I'm going to have the lowest token price. That's like how my brain, I'm a very simplistic person. So I think, personally, I think the stats that I showed in terms of going and making it someone else's problem and not having like a co-location or a on-premise hybrid system, I think in the short term, customers will get a lot of, don't know what that is. I think they'll have a nasty shock at what their token price is if they're not thinking about it right now. That's Matt Shaw's opinion. Thank you.
So I'm Darin. I'm the developer relations at Featherless.ai. More about that later. But today I'll be exploring and navigating the world of open source, well, let's say open models. First, maybe a raise of hands. Who here has built something previously with one of the big tech models? So GPT, Anthropic. Okay, cool. Now, who has built something with open source models? So DeepSeek. Okay, pretty nice. I've been to events in both Berlin and Amsterdam the last couple of months, and there it were only like 4 or 5 people. So you can be proud of yourself for that, London. Now, before the whole DeepSeek event, a lot of questions were, well, a lot of issues people raise with open source models is that these open source models can't really handle the things I want to do. Now, with DeepSeek, this is not true anymore. As we see in these graphs, DeepSeek has caught up with some of the state-of-the-art big tech models. And for us working in the open source space, this was not really a surprise. Like these Chinese labs have been incrementally building in public and improving their models step by step. Like every 2 months, you could see their papers being published with incremental improvements. So for some people, this was like an overnight shock when DeepSeek happened. But if you follow the space closely, you will notice that these things are happening in public and are not a surprise. Maybe also interesting, this week, we at Featherless announced our new model, Quirky 72B, which is a non-transformer based model. Basically, GPT, Claude, etc., are transformer based models, but we are now trying to prove that it's possible to also do it in a non-transformer way, and that is maybe the future, and that we don't necessarily need transformers. We've done it with we've trained the model with only 8 GPUs. And from our estimations, the inference cost is about 100 times less. Now, I won't go too deep into this. We are releasing a paper soon. So if you're interested in that, be sure to follow us. So yeah, this says surpassing GPT 3.5 Turbo, but that doesn't really say that much these days because even a Mistral model passes GPT 3.5 Turbo. So we've tried to match it with models of equivalent size. So our Quirky model with the latest Qwen QWQ32B, and we can see that it actually performs quite decently against those models. Now, a lot of you might have not run open source models because you've run into quite some issues. It's an infrastructure nightmare sometimes. You have to first get this model from Hugging Face, then it's quite expensive. And then there are solutions like OpenRouter, which do inference as a service, where it's a price per token. You pay for each token. It's quite expensive at scale. For example, let's say you're building an app with OpenRouter. Suddenly you post a tweet, overnight your app blows up and your costs skyrocket. That's quite unpredictable, and they often lock you into their ecosystems. Now, here is where I have to do my featherless introduction. Basically, we provide serverless inference to over 4,000 models. Every language model on Hugging Face, we provide access to. We do it on a subscription base, so it's only our cheapest subscription is $10. But enough about that. I don't want to sell too much to you guys today. What I do want to talk about today is what are, apart from these big models like DeepSeek and Qwen and Gemma, what are these more fine-tuned models being used for? One of the use cases is Sawalny. Sawalny is made by Omar, a guy from Morocco. He is fine-tuning an LLM, Sawalny, on Moroccan Arabic. So specifically a dialect called the Verheijke. And the Verheijke is mostly a spoken language. So you can imagine there comes difficulties with that when you want to train an LLM. It's hard to find data around that. So he has come into different challenges in finding data, but his goal is to, the issue with the bigger LLMs is that a lot of these small dialects will be forgotten over time, right? The people in Morocco also want to use these, let's say LLMs, also want to empower them with that knowledge. And the goal of Omar is to empower those people with Sawalny. Now, another application is Wyvern Chat, which is, who here of you knows about character AI? Okay. So basically, Wyvern Chat is a character AI open source version. Where we use fine-tuned models to talk with different characters. Like about 50% of the use of the models being used on our platform are for these role-play characters. We have a lot of role-play fine-tuned models where people basically use a model to chat with different characters. I'll give you an example. Here we can talk with Chase of the famous Netflix series Arcane. And here we are using a fine-tuned model by a user who basically took a lot of anime and fiction storybook data and fine-tuned that on a Qwen model. Then you get these responses of these characters. People make these character sheets, and we see that the market in these types of applications is actually quite big. You can look at the numbers of character AI even. It's not really comparable, but at least there is a huge interest in these type of fine-tuned models. Now, we're also OpenAI compatible, which makes us also easily integratable in all of these apps like LangChain, Silly Tavern. You can use it in Cursor or Novel Crafter. Now, I've open sourced a couple of applications for people that want to develop with Featherless or just want to develop with open source in general. Well, I won't go over them now, but basically this is like a small ChatGPT on your own computer. They're all available on our GitHub and you can access them for free. They're all open sourced. Another thing I've made is basically the open source version of Deep Research, where it's basically deep research, but fully with open source components. So you can here, I've made it with DeepSeek R1. And I would say deep research is still quite a bit better, but for the price comparison, Deep Dive is certainly worth it. And I would say try it out yourself. It's also fully open source. Now, based on this tweet from the well-known Andrej Karpathy, I wanted to also get you guys to think about maybe different evaluations. We all know like the famous MMLU scores or the org evals, but it might be interesting to also look how like LLMs compete in a game of chess. So I've here been running the latest Quen model against our latest Quirky model, and I'm not sure who's winning now, but it seems to be black. But yeah, it's also interesting to think about new evaluations. How can we test these LLMs in things that are different than just math tests or stuff like that, like actual use cases? Now to end my presentation and open the floor for an open talk about open source, I've also gotten you guys a code to try our premium subscription for a month free. You just have to enter the code LondonCamp. You can also just send me a message on LinkedIn after, and I can repeat it to you and guide you through the process. But feel free. Yeah, it's a full month free. It's inference to all models soon. Hopefully, the new DeepSeek as well. So yeah, feel free to make use of it. And now I open the floor to all questions you have around open source and Featherless in general.
Thanks for the presentation. Very interesting to see open source models are available. £10 a month, you said?
Yeah.
And unlimited tokens.
Unlimited tokens, yes.
I'll leave that for somebody else. I have a question about, do you provide the tool or interface for fine-tuning models? Or do people bring their own tools? You just provide them with the access to the model. How does that work?
So basically, every model on Hugging Face that reaches 100 downloads is automatically uploaded to our server. But if you can just upload your model to Hugging Face as well and ask us to upload it. We will do that as well. We also provide a fine-tuning service, but that's like separately from
There's a separate cost.
Yeah, that we have like our team was like we have a lot of some of the early fine-tuners in the scene, so they do that as a separate, let's say, business, but it's not really part of the whole Featherless brand. But we can provide that service if needed.
That also allows you to do the whole life cycle. Like
Yeah. Yeah. Then we take care of the whole life cycle from start to finish. Yeah, it is part of us, Featherless as a company, but it's not something we openly provide on the platform. It's not like you can go to a page to fine-tune a model, but you can ask us and we'll handle this for you for sure. For example, the Sawalny by Omar was one of those cases where we guided him through the process of fine-tuning based on a specific data set and then put that out on our platform. Thank you for the question. Thank you.
Two questions. First, let's say from a small business perspective,
Yes.
there's a strong as a philosophy or
From a cost perspective, for sure. From an intellectual perspective, like I only think open source AI will be better and better, right? We've already seen it with DeepSeek. Like the traffic we've gotten from DeepSeek has been insane. Also, the way I currently use AI is just a bunch of models, right? I don't necessarily stick to one simple model, which is previously I use only Claude. Now I use DeepSeek, I use Qwen, I use Claude, and I compare all the answers and basically have like a team of my different little AI assistants and then get a combined response of all of them to form my response, let's say. So I think in that sense, Featherless is nice because you basically have access to for thousands of these AI assistants, unlimited, and you don't really are locked into one model and then the next month GPT comes out with a better model, then Claude comes back with a better model, you have to change your subscription again. Now you have access to all of these open models forever, basically. Yes. Yeah.
Some applications then let's say the interactions, the tasks, the images, are those kind of leverage for the computing of the models, but
yeah, we don't store any logs. We basically only provide inference. Like I get this question at every event, which is normal, but like storing those logs for those chats would be an insane amount of data, and nobody of us would even bother looking into it. So yeah, we also have a privacy policy on our website if you want to read specifics about it, but we don't store anything on our end. The only thing we do store actually is the length of your prompt. That's one thing we do store. Our, let's say, brand slogan is that we want to provide AI to everyone, regardless of nation or language. So we also think, like our CEO has spoken more about it, but that the future of AI is not necessarily only these big models, and then the hope that everything works perfectly with these big models. But we also think that there is a lot of use case for these smaller models that maybe can only do one or two things. For example, is only good at extracting data from your SQL table, right? And that's fine. Like not everybody needs your LLM to be the best in maths or the best in science or whatever. Sometimes your specific use case only needs like a small friction of the entire possibilities of that LLM. And then especially fine-tuned LLMs can help because you can train that more on that specific data sets, I would say. So I think for sure there's a use case for these smaller LLMs, and I don't think like it will all be absorbed by these bigger models. Thank you for the question.
Another one. There's 4,000 models on the site. How does one search or compare? Or do you have a sort of a benchmarking show that the best of breed models, ones and open source ones, and which ones are like more comparable to the other ones? So when you choose one of the open source models, you know that you're choosing something that's comparable to something to the other models.
Yeah.
Like some mechanism to that, or people have to just search through your model list.
Great question. So there are some, actually not by us, but some benchmarks online for open source models. We're also planning to add some evaluations ourselves that are different from the current ones available. It's not something we have currently, but it has been asked a lot by our community, and yeah, it's something we definitely have to add to our service.
one more question on the back of this question, but this is a different one.
Yeah.
Since you're hosting 4,000 of those models, how are you ensuring that they're not malicious, or when the user uses it, their information is not leaked out? All kinds of questions in that area. So with open source models, you want to I think for anything like available, you might not inspect it, but you just start using it to get a side effect.
Yeah.
How do you ensure that on your platform something like that doesn't happen?
Yeah. So if I understand the question correctly, a user just makes a request to our platform and then they just get the response back. So there isn't really, there are like these models. For example, we recently had a case of a model that was trained on racist data. And in those cases, we as a platform have to consider, do we want to still be the platform that provides access to all models, or do we draw a line at that kind of models, right? And in those extreme cases where it violates certain human rights, we've decided, okay, that's something we do not provide on our platform and we do not give access to. And that is something we currently don't have systems implemented for it, but our team is really on top of those models because it's also very obvious in the data that those models are trained for those specific use cases. But it's also something we're aware that in the future will become a lot more difficult, right? The models are like 2 weeks ago, it was 3,000 models. Now it's already 4,000 models. It will only increase and it will be harder for us to track this. So we are planning to do, we're thinking about doing a call just for like more transparency in data sets, because that's currently not happening. Like GPT, nobody knows the data set of GPT. Like we all have guesstimates, like it's a combination of Common Crawl, Wikipedia, stuff like that, but nobody really knows what's inside of it, right? We've even, maybe a small anecdote, we've even been contacted before by, malicious actors to include certain data in our data sets and in our models, but that's kind of stuff, yeah. All our data sets are open and transparent, so with us you can check it, but with a lot of companies you can't. So it's something really advocate for more transparency in those data sets. I don't know if that really answered, because I'm...
What I understood was a little bit overlapping. Those models are not running on in our infrastructure, right?
Yeah.
That security concern is more yours than ours. But then there's also other layers of security that the end user might be.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm not saying that AI fraud is all
no.
from all these problems, but they probably take a lot of guardrails and other things to available their actual firm to safeguard themselves and then users from as much as they can.
Yeah.
But you have open source models which you're not authors of.
Yeah, for sure.
And then the authors, as you said, can insert malicious content.
For sure. Yeah.
Lots of other surprises, and then the end user or you or both end up facing the issue.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, that's true. Like the models we host, it's not like our site would have an issue or something, but the content in that sense is something we do not really control. Like even like the Wyvern chat application I showed you earlier, all of those role-played models are also models that are, let's say, more NSFW based, right? And even there, the line is very gray on what is fine with people and what is not fine with people. But our line is very broad in that sense, because that's kind of part of giving open access to everything, I guess. But yeah, it's definitely like a good discussion to have, and it's something that's something to think about as well in the future, and to only become more prevalent in the future for sure. Thank you for your question.
What's your general thoughts on what's your general thoughts on engineers using models for programming? So the one real concern from companies and using an example of the real and giving information to them. the model themselves that people don't want to. So it's really tech at the moment, companies that are solving the problems where, that's safeguarding the
Yeah. So we've actually been asked a lot recently from companies if it's possible to privately host their models. So just for the company so that nobody can access it, and that basically also that their data is private in a sense, that it doesn't get trained, because I think like even on ChatGPT, you can have this business plan where your data doesn't get trained on. So that is definitely something I see happening. I see a lot. I've been to Berlin the other week, and especially there, a lot of companies are more focused on privacy. Like I even was asked there if it was possible that somebody could break into the AWS GPU servers and then steal their data. So it's a big topic there. So a lot of companies there are working on privacy. So I think for the engineers themselves, it's like a fine line, right? You want to use these models because it's in your advantage, and at the same time, if you're working for a company with like sensitive data, it's hard. But there are solutions. Like you can always host models yourself. But we also offer a private cloud solution. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question. Okay, yeah, you can ask me after the more if I. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation.
So one, I took one project, so I want to say thank you for this input. HPE and civil, plenty of tools live. We are staying to 8:30 or not. We will stay networking.
Okay.
And we are going to put up the presentation on YouTube. So the aim to go for meetings on YouTube. So if you go to AICamp, you just look for AICamp and you can find each other. And
yeah, just one last thing before we all go and network and have a bit more food. Just a bit of help if you guys could. Like to have a selfie with everyone. That's okay. Just gonna look at my phone. If this is weird, then feel free to get out because this go on socials. But it'll be super helpful for us. So maybe I'll do it a bit geeky. So on the count of 3, can we all say tokens? Yeah, where we are. Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3. Awesome. All right. Thank you for coming, everyone. Yeah, thank you for Mr. So just